Oh man, I am so excited about this conversation, and I've been thinking about this for months, and I know like everyone in the room, so I'll be authentic to you, which is you're living the dream. I mean, how many people get to ever say that they're the CTO of the CIA?
Not
Amazing.
many. I guess I'm the first.
All right,
So
he is the first. He
I am the
is the
first and only
first.
one on the planet that can say that.
Exactly. All right, so most of us know about the CIA really through movies, maybe sometimes books.
Yeah, all made here.
All made here. So I guess the first question to kick it off, since we are in a set kind of space, is what is it actually really like? Is it anything like the movies, or is it not quite the way it's being portrayed?
So thank you for having me. Obviously, being an opening act for Katy Perry obviously is also part of the amazing part of this job. So very humbled, very honored. So yeah, the simple answer is it is a crazy juxtaposition of insane, incredible spy work that you think of and case officers. And there are actually two case officers from the agency in the audience right now. See if you can spot them. This incredible connection between this amazing spy work, and we're a government agency. We're a 76-year-old spy agency in Washington, D.C. And so there's a combination of like incredible stuff that you see in the movies, some of it true, some of it exaggerated. There is actually an amazing amount of overlap because you'll be sitting in a meeting thinking, wow, this could be actually a movie set, or we're being punked right now, where I'm saying these things that actually I would be saying in a movie, but this is actual reality. So it is an amazing thing. So a couple of real big misconceptions that I had to deal with when I got to the agency, which I think the American public itself doesn't understand. First is we're a foreign intelligence agency. So we don't actually operate here in the United States. I have friends who text me very often trying to get out of parking tickets or things. They're like, dude.
Yeah,
like,
and you never responded to me.
Yeah, I never. Yeah, exactly. We don't do domestic law enforcement. We do not focus our attention here inside the United States. We have a counterintelligence function, which we do operate inside the U.S. There are very, very specific authorities that we have to work inside the U.S., but our focus is entirely on the outside. Second, we're a human intelligence operation. So when you see in the movies, the ones that all of you produce, the hacker hacking into a system, there are basically less than a dozen intelligence agencies in the United States government that are all in there, each playing a different role. And our focus is on human intelligence gathering. So we have NSA, which collects SIGINT. We have NGA, which collects GEOINT. And then we actually integrate that together. As a matter of fact, my office in the old headquarters building on the 7th floor, the one that you see the shot of, right next door is where the presidential daily brief gets done. And that's where all the intelligence from across the government gets integrated in for the president in the morning on an iPad for him to get briefed.
SIGINT and GEOINT. I'm sure people just want to know, what is it?
Signals intelligence, so anything that's about electronic, anything going over wires, anything going over electronic signals, et cetera, that's called SIGINT. GEOINT is stuff that you actually pull off of satellites. So things like a lot of the information that we made unclassified in the run-up to the Russian war, invasion of Ukraine, a lot of it was GEOINT, which is basically showing the forces massing and everything. And all of that basically gets integrated in the sense that the satellite data, the geo data, the electronic data, the human data, all gets integrated in, and we call that all-source intelligence gathering. And all-source pulls it together and then provides an incredible picture of that, but that gets pulled together basically with all the intelligence agencies.
All right, thanks for clarifying. Career trajectory question for you. You report directly to the CIA director, Burns.
Director Bill Burns.
Bill Burns.
The man himself.
I'm really curious, first of all, why did he actually create a CTO role?
Yeah.
And secondly, I've known you really since your entrepreneurial days. We go way back. I'm kind of curious, why did you take the job?
Dude, you get a call from the CIA. To be the
Did they call you, or did they, send a hummingbird?
It was a little weird. The first call that I got, it was some secret. There's a CTO position for some national intelligence organization. And very soon it got vectored in. You get the spec sheet, and it's the CIA. So I don't know if there's a Monty Python, which is, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects a call from CIA. So that call came in. Really, there are three big things happening out in the world that is why CIA is even here in places like this. We normally have never been out in the public, out in the open, really engaged with the public in this way. So the confluence, basically three things. Number one, the United States government right now, the national security apparatus, is making a huge pivot from counterterrorism to great power competition. And Chairman Xi has made it clear that technology is the battlefield that we as a country and them as a country are going to be fighting. And tech is that battlefield. It's the economic battlefield. It's that. The second piece is there is an incredible revolution going on in technology itself, which venture capitalists and investors like you are fueling. And in the LA area in particular, we were just talking about this, there's just an incredible amount of defense and hard tech that has been accumulated over the past decades that is now being turned into, with entrepreneurs, turning into startups that are serving the military as it itself is going through a generational change in the way our military systems are built. So we're thinking of these as what I call vertically integrated systems. So when you think of an aircraft carrier, a F-35, these are very, very big vertically integrated hardware pieces to what we're seeing in Ukraine, right? It's what we call autonomous and attritable. Small systems, swarming systems, much smaller, much harder to defend against. So the architecture of the world is changing. And we're not only seeing this in artificial intelligence, we're seeing this in biotech, we're seeing this in space, we're seeing this in fintech, we're seeing this in semiconductors. There's just a broad revolution going on in tech that is fueling and making this battlefield so exciting. And the third piece, which is CIA specific, is, and I don't know any other way to put it other than it's hard spying nowadays. Between biometrics, video cameras, and cell phones, our ability of our case officers to operate in hard target areas is incredibly hard. And we say this very publicly. It's, of course, equally hard for our adversaries to spy against us. So in the spy agency world, a lot of work going on the technology side to overcome what we call ubiquitous technical surveillance, UTS. And so the confluence of these three things means tech is important. And Director Burns wanted to make a statement that this pivot for CIA in supporting the White House and Congress and policymakers, for ourselves and us being an intelligence agency right in the middle of the battlefield, we had to make this huge pivot. So the role got created. The last thing I'd say is Director Burns himself has prided himself in, CIA in general, we're a shy agency. We don't want to be in the spotlight. We don't want to be out there. But given this new focus on tech, we have to be out engaged with the public, right? Working with amazing investors like yourselves, startups and others to understand the battlefield and seeing where it's going. So I have to be, and I have the best job. I'm an overt employee of the agency, and I can do all kinds of cool stuff, both inside and outside. So it's been amazing.
All right. So clearly your boss gave you some OKRs when you showed up, which usually happens.
Checking them off.
Checking them off. What were kind of in a nutshell, what were the three maybe key priorities he put at the top of your list, and maybe talk about how do you stack rank kind of how technology impacts and then ultimately helps us with our national security?
Yeah, so really a couple of key things. Number one is, so when I talk about tech at CIA, there's sort of two broad areas that we talk about. One is just the general enterprise tech to run a 24/7 global organization. And we are literally global. We're in countries that you probably know and countries that don't know we're there. So running that in terms of comms, data, managing our assets, managing our case officers, et cetera. It's a very, very complex, and we have a spotlight on us. So it's not any other global organization like Coke or Pepsi that's distributing products. We have an incredible spotlight on us. So that's number one, is operational tech, to do enterprise tech. Then there's what I call secret squirrel tech that all of us are familiar with from the movies, the Q stuff. It's very, very detailed, bespoke technology, in many cases on an op by op basis, because you obviously don't want to create patterns that get unraveled. You don't want to create leave behinds that somebody can basically unfurl the intent. And the third thing, which is what we call technology as an intelligence target, is the idea of us basically looking at the tech industry and understanding the answers to questions that the National Security Council and the White House. So as you know, we have the CHIPS Act. There was a whole bunch of stuff that happened around 5G and telco with Huawei. You've seen the AI, declaration from the White House in terms of the executive order. And then there's, of course, what happened in fintech. So you can see the United States government getting involved in the tech industry from a policy-making perspective. And many of you probably don't know is that behind the scenes, CIA are analysts who, probably I think you see in Jack Ryan or some of those other movies, do not carry guns, don't run around, doing ops and things. We have incredible deep analysts.
So you've not jumped out of a helicopter yet.
I cannot confirm or deny that. But I did actually go on something. I actually tried out night vision goggles for the first time, which are way heavier than you actually think they are. Like this idea of like wearing them and jumping around and running around, it's hard. But I do get to do some of that cool stuff.
All right. So I guess to be timely, I cannot let it pass that Russia's got to be on a lot of people's minds. Yep. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, we've heard at least rumors of things that might be happening, and I have no idea what, if anything, you can share. But I guess maybe in a nutshell, how concerned should I be?
Well, I think you should be very concerned. Countries like Russia and China, the level of sophistication they bring to disrupting what we do and their technical capabilities are absolutely world-class. The Russians in particular, one of the things that all of you are probably tracking, I mean, the Ukraine war, and there's obviously stuff they're doing to us, there's stuff they're doing to the Europeans, things that they're doing to shape the battlefield. The Ukraine war and its the fallout from it is a very interesting case study. I think all of us will look back at this war as a transitional war, an event that combined, I think of it as World War I techniques with Terminator-like technology, right? So on one hand, you have trench warfare going on with drones flying over. And it's this weird mishmash, and I'm sure there's a movie to be made like that. I'm sure it's already been made. But this idea of the old meets the new. So you still have the kinetic aspects of a war that have to happen, combined with the electronic and next generation digital stuff happening together. So this to us is a lot of lessons learned, and of course, learning a lot from what that means, the capabilities that they have, but also starting to think about what could turn out to be the next war, which is around Taiwan and the Taiwan Straits. And we, of course, have to prepare for that. There's a lot of work going on in the government to make sure that we deter that or don't ever have to go there. But, we get paid to basically focus on the worst case scenario. And so that's something that we're spending a lot of time on.
Right. Yeah. So, I guess eyes on the prize. We should talk about China.
Yep.
And, obviously in the news all the time, increasingly so because of, a lot of kind of Xi Jinping's very kind of aggressive posturing. I don't know if it's posturing, but aggressiveness, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the question for me, just to be more concrete, is like, if you look at current technology segments and emerging ones, where should we be concerned about China's strengths? What are the things that we as a U.S. technology community and the government are doing to kind of start to close that gap? And kind of
right.
how do you think about that, frame that?
Yeah. So how China is different from Russia is that we actually consider them to be a peer or a near peer competitor, right? So they're not a society that we believe or a country that believes is sort of, they have the capability for it. Now, my read on the situation is this, which is I always start with the basic premise that sometimes we confusingly call this a race with China, that we're racing, it's a technology race. This is not a race. A race implies that there's an endpoint and a gold medalist, a winner and a loser. What's going to happen is this is an infinite race. It's a race without an end. And it's going to get fought literally across every emerging tech segment, as well as mature areas where they work very, very effectively. The Chinese traditionally have been what's called fast followers in technology, which is a lot of the innovation happens in our tech sectors, and they follow 6 months, a year. It used to be 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, and now it's in the order of months. The second thing is we give away a lot of our intellectual property. Look at the algorithms behind these GPT algorithms and LLMs. All of that is published, information that we as a society, that's the way we run, right? Educational institutions, companies, we give it away.
They sit behind the Great Firewall.
And they sit behind the Great Firewall. And the concern, and we're okay, I think, as a country and a society with a fair fight. The problem happens is when a sovereign country distorts the market and you have issues like IP theft, which is rampant. I mean, I think there was a segment that the FBI ran on how much IP theft is happening and other pieces there. So, when you look at one of your portfolio companies...
You weren't at my presentation the other day, but I shared a stat that in 2025, the estimate on cybercrime damage, which includes IP theft, is on the order of 10 trillion.
That's
which
insane.
Is, makes it the third biggest economy in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of your portfolio companies that is highly capitalized comes out with one idea or hook that makes something work. That's a multi-billion or in many cases, things like fusion energy, the company that unlocks fusion energy or quantum computing. These are multi-trillion-dollar markets that IP just sails right off a wire. So that's another issue. So the market distortion, the forced IP transfer, IP theft, these are issues where normally the United States government, as an entrepreneur, right, 25 years in Silicon Valley, built and sold 4 companies, we never had the United States government involved in our work, right, Seksom?
Right.
And it was great. We paid our taxes, at least all of us hopefully did. But the USG really had a hands-off approach to this because things worked well. And one of the critical things that we're struggling with, I think, in Washington, we're not a policy-making organization, by the way. So CIA is purely a support function. There are policymakers that do this, but everyone is struggling in terms of what that intervention looks like, what they need to do, because these emerging tech markets are very fragile. And you don't want hard-handed intervention coming in the middle. But when you've got 2 countries now involved, there's collateral damage, and the little companies and startups in the middle might get trampled in the middle here. So we're in a very weird situation. And the last piece I'll throw in is next generation defense tech. So you actually have speakers, I think, today, Brian from Anduril, Trey from Trey Stevens and others, who are leaning, and then of course all of you leaning into investing in bringing Silicon Valley and techniques to next generation military industrial building systems. And I think that's very exciting, but it's still an experiment. It's still very, very, very new.
I wanted to go back to a comment you made about, I guess people don't think about the nature of spycraft and the fact that ultimately, like, you're running spies in the field.
Yeah.
And, for me, the question that comes to mind, which, we've been discussing over the last couple of days is, doesn't like technology and AI in particular get to the point where like we don't actually need to have humans in the loop? Like,
right.
How much do you really need humans in spycraft?
That's a fantastic question. And actually, literally because you've always got to have a clever question that you ask your prospective boss in the interview, right? And my clever question was, I'm the first CTO of this agency, and it's basically the most human-centered organization that you possibly can find in the United States government, right? It's human intelligence gathering with case officers and amazing people. And I said, am I going to be the first and last CTO of this agency? Because humans are going to be obsolete. I spent 25 years of my life getting rid of humans in the middle of workflow, right? Humans are hard to scale. They're expensive. They complain, blah, blah, blah. Like, we'll just get rid of them. Let's replace them.
And they rest.
And yeah, exactly. Like, what's up with this? Director Burns' answer to me was absolutely fascinating and point on, is you underestimate the role of the human in all the operations that actually happen. So in the movie, when you see the NSA hacker hacking away at a router or on a server or doing something there, I can't talk much about what happens, But in
I wish you
many,
could.
many cases, there's a human being, most likely from the CIA, because those are our authorities and our case officers and assets that we run, in the middle doing a bunch of stuff to enable that connection. The sheer physicality of what our teams are able to do in foreign countries just absolutely blows you away. Dave Marlowe, who was our director at head of operations, basically chief spy, he just recently retired and everything. So when I first joined, we were walking into a meeting when I was getting onboarded. And Dave said, "You know what this meeting is about?" I said, "No idea, Dave." He said, "This is the meeting where you will truly understand that you're working for a spy agency." And 2 hours later, I walked out of there and like my mind was blown. So there's just a lot of stuff that happens in the back that you don't see that enables all of this stuff. So even in a world that goes all digital, our job, and especially my job plus my teammates' job at CIA, is to focus on tech enabling the human operator and our case officers and our field teams to continue to operate in that and use tech for the best way to actually enable our mission.
I got one last question for you.
All right, cool.
Because you're talking about your mind being blown. So you now have an experience that actually few of us will actually ever experience, which is you're behind the wall now.
Yeah.
What is it that has surprised you most about this agency?
Well, I think when we open, just the what CIA actually is portrayed as doing versus not, what it actually does. I think there's a huge gap in that. And my 11-year-old still, she watches the movies and everything and thinks, and I'm like, Daddy does everything that happens in the movies. But I think there's a huge gap in terms of perception of what we do, where we do it, how we do it. And I think actually the funniest part of it actually is how everybody at CIA, when we go into the office and do our work, after 2 years of being there, how normal this type of work becomes. We'll be talking about doing something that absolutely 2 years before would, again, just be right out of a movie set or something as you imagine, and it's just called work now. And
so it's become kind of feels a little bit commonplace.
It does. It does to me, and I want that new car smell to still be there always. So I was one, and my team actually pulls me into the back room once in a while every time they see my energy level flagging, and will show me some other really cool thing that we do, and I'm like back up again. So I'm like, yay!
All right, Nand, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks, everyone.